Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, March 12th, and today we're going to do a fun little compilation show. Until my voice fully returns, I can't really do like full-on shows, but as you can tell, it's getting better. We have such a huge back catalog at this point, though, that we thought we could, put together a few shows like this, collecting some related segments together, and that way I can slowly ease back into my full shows soon. So today is a total tunnel show, looking back at a few segments we've done on some big high tunnel mistakes that I've made, if heating a tunnel would be worth it, and building that old dream tunnel, maybe in that order, but maybe not. We'll see. So let's do it. Today, I thought I would talk a bit more about some of the mistakes I've made with our high tunnel, at least our main one. These are things that I think, especially for those planning on building a high tunnel for this winter, well, these are at least some of the things to keep in mind that are mistakes that I've made and how I would maybe do them over. First, I really wish I had taken some more time to get the ground not only leveled, but perhaps raised up a bit. The tunnel, which is a Rimmel greenhouse tunnel, who is also notably a show sponsor, so you should buy like 10 tunnels from them today so they know how much we appreciate them. Anyway, the tunnel itself is nice and level, but the ground is clearly not, as evidenced by the fact that one end of the tunnel is a foot or more deeper into the ground than the other, by the fact that I can touch the trusses on one end by standing flat on the ground, and on the other end I have to jump. It's not a bad slant, and you can certainly build on uneven ground, but we find that the higher part is a little bit harder to irrigate than the lower side, and that has led to some imbalance in growth. The lower side is also just generally wetter. Like water actually will get in there quite a bit. It can be a good thing, but it isn't always. It will straight up flood on that bottom side of the tunnel in heavy rain events. Another mistake I made in that vein was not really having a great drainage plan, which I discussed in another recent episode. Well, to be fair, my original plan was to install gutters and water tanks, and I have not yet gotten around to that. But I do regret not also planning for like draining away the massive amounts of water that hit the roof of that thing and kind of collect in one area on each of the sides. I likewise wish I had planned my doors better. These doors are still fixable, but I thought I could get away with having them slightly below ground just to kind of keep the air from coming underneath. And I could do that, but for like a week. But now, when the wood chips or soil or grass or something grows in that little track area, the doors won't really slide smoothly or close fully unless I dig them out. Now, I can cut them level with the ground and fill in the area below them, but that was, let's just call it dumb. All right, so if you're watching on YouTube, here's the door, and you can see they kind of go below ground a little bit, and I have this little just trench right here, and in the fall I dig it out, and then the doors kind of shut pretty easily, but then every spring I open them up and they get refilled. So that little trench ends up full of wood chips and plants, which is fun. Also dumb was not really putting down some kind of weed barrier on the outside where the baseboards are. I had been so annoyed dealing with landscape fabric on our old farm, I was determined to find another option. And what I found was, well, now just a bunch of weed whacking. And that's fine, I guess, but it's a lot of work, and the risk of weed seeds is ever present. Now, I know a concrete border would be the ultimate in weed blocking technology, but I hesitate to suggest that even that level of permanence in the beginning of your farm before you really know your space, even if you have the money. In fact, if you have the money for like a concrete border, perhaps getting electric and a fertigation system and like a ridge vent and those sorts of things, all those other little tweaks that can make a tunnel really, really great, might be a better investment first. Ultimately, our main tunnel is nice, it's functional, no issues with the structure itself, and I love that we bought the ridge vent. That was a good call. It really helps to cool that thing off in the summer, so shouts to Jackson Roulette for encouraging me to do that. So I love our tunnel, but I definitely see several things about it that I wish I had personally taken more time with. With our two smaller tunnels, although sure they are now more permanent with the infrastructure we installed on them, which is like trusses and a center purlin, ground post, wind bracing, all that stuff, I don't think of them with quite the same level of permanence because of how small they are, less than half the size of our main tunnel. They do fine on the slope, and my experience and dependence on them, especially this year, is lower, so I don't have as much expectation for them. And in general, I like that high tunnels can be put in a lot of different situations. Our friends at Grow Appalachia, for an example, install them all over the hilly, mountainous Appalachian region to help growers in those areas extend their seasons. I like that these tunnels can be kind of molded to different terrains and circumstances. So if you have the money and you really want to make a living off these structures, it is worth doing them the right way from the beginning and getting it all nice and level. But also, a tunnel can serve you well in many circumstances. So I don't want to discourage anyone who doesn't quite have the money from thinking they shouldn't get one if they can't make it perfect from the very start. But I do think those investments can really pay off. Anyway, things you did well or not well in your own high tunnel construction, anything you'd add, let us know, and we'll get to it on Friday, which is when we get to stuff. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. BRB.
Today's episode is brought to you by Grown By. Grow smarter with Grown By, the farmer-owned cooperative. Grown By is the platform for online sales of everything. Custom and traditional CSAs, halves of beef, flower bouquets, wholesale to restaurants, and now Grown By supports in-person sales too. With their new app, Grown By Register, you can supercharge your market and farm stand, finally bringing together your online and offline sales and customer data. Grown By is proud to make local food accessible by processing SNAP benefits online and in person right within the app. Grown By helps you to put your best food forward. Schedule a demo today at coop.grownby.com/no-till. That's coop.grownby.com/no-till. All right, back to the show.
Today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Dwayne T, who writes, quote, "Hello, Farmer Jesse. I love everything you do for this community. Your videos turn me into a market gardener." Awesome. Dwayne, thanks. "I'm looking into getting a high tunnel for the coming growing season. I am in Zone 7A right outside of St. Louis, Missouri. I heard you talk a while back on how the ridge vent is a must. Is there any must-haves? Looking to go down the buy once, cry once route, LOL. Thanks." End quote. Okay, fun question. Also, St. Louis is supposedly a really good soccer city, so shouts to that as well. Okay, so I'm treating this somewhat like a thought experiment that I've not done. Like, if I had my druthers, what all would I want for my tunnel? All right, so first, let's assume that money is at least somewhat of an obstacle here, because obviously we would all take a fully automated tunnel built on some sort of climate battery with solar heating or whatever. But let's say I have a relatively normal high tunnel budget, but can spend 10 or 20 extra $1,000 to really get it right. Where would that money go? First, I love my ridge vent, and I would have to say I would miss it if it didn't exist on my tunnel. So for me, that's kind of a must, though maybe I'm just a little bit spoiled. It just really, really helps in the summer at cooling the tunnel off. And when you open it up, it kind of just turns the tunnel into somewhat of a shade house. For the uninitiated, a ridge vent is a mechanism at the top of the tunnel, like goes straight down the long ways down your tunnel, that you can open and close to moderate temperature and release stagnant air. It literally like splits the plastic in half and it lets the air out the top. I want to say ours was like roughly $9,000 or so extra dollars, so that would eat up a healthy chunk of that budget. But it is a luxury I absolutely love. Before that, though, I would probably put time and money into the site preparation and drainage. Tunnels for me have always been something I have somewhat thrown together in the season to get ready for the fall and winter production, which is dumb, and I always regret it. If you can, level the site, get the drainage figured out, and then build it. Get electric out there too if you at all think you'll need it. Get irrigation lines buried and ready for the tunnel before it goes up if you can, so you're not having to deal with that afterwards, like putting stuff underneath of the metal structure. As for the structure itself, you definitely should get wind bracing and good hip boards. At least that's what I would do. I really like having the trusses that go perpendicular to the structure as well, just to help the support at the top. Investing in polycarbonate to bury beneath the baseboards for weed and rodent protection is something I've seen more and more growers doing, and that makes sense to me, though you could also, or alternatively, invest in gopher wire to help keep them from getting in if that's an issue in your area. I like having good, strong polycarbonate end walls with the sliding door, just making sure it's wide enough to get your equipment in and out. Alternative to, or perhaps in conjunction with the ridge vent, you should still think about ventilation. You could get a shutter, like one of those shutters that opens and closes for the end walls. That helps release heat on hot days. If you have electricity at the site, there are also things like shutters and fans that you can use to really move the air in and out. What's nice about that is the ridge vent, for instance, is passive, but the fans are actively moving and guaranteeing the airflow in a better way, more consistent way. Like a significant number of your diseases are going to come from poor airflow. As for a furnace or some way of heating, you have to really be dedicated to maximizing production to go that route, because every penny is going to matter with that much financial input. Like, you're talking thousands of dollars a year in natural gas. Like, can you make up for that in your sales enough to make it profitable? That can be tough. But this may also depend on your climate. Here in Zone 6B, we can get away with more passive heating options than someone up north, so it's worth exploring what new technology is out there. Call one of our high tunnel sponsors and see what they say. That will look very good on me, so make sure to tell them I said hi, of course. Also, I don't want to disappoint anyone by not talking more about climate batteries, which are basically systems that are built under your tunnel, where fans push the warm air from the tunnel underneath the ground into tubing and effectively store it there to be released when the temperatures drop. Very cool idea, and it has been tested and proved in many different ways. I promise more exploration of this particular idea in the future, but I just saw that Threefold Farm in Pennsylvania recently put up a 30-minute video detailing theirs. If you like more info just right away, I watched that this weekend and I was just blown away. I loved it. These climate batteries are not for everyone, but it is definitely worth looking into. I'll link that in the show notes so you can get a jump on it. Very interesting stuff, and good for them for making such a nice detailed video. Shouts to that. Now, last thing is like the skin or the covering. For that, I've only ever used a single sheet of poly, and in my climate, for most of my needs, that's pretty much fine. If I were further north, I would consider double poly, but you'll need to be able to install a blower to keep the two layers apart. The nice thing is that the second layer not only helps insulate the tunnel, but stabilize the tunnel as well. It just makes it more rigid and thus more stable. There's also something called Solar Wrap that basically looks like bubble wrap, and although I've never tried it myself, I don't have it on any of our tunnels. I know a few growers who do love it. Some things to consider, though, is that it adds a significant expense, and the tunnel has to be built with extreme precision so each segment can fit the bows. Like, it's not like one giant skin you just throw over top. It's literally like 4 or 5 foot sections that you slide up into specific mechanism that keeps it locked in place. But the idea is that it will outlast regular poly, and if one section gets slashed by a zealous 3-year-old, voice of experience here, you do not have to replace the whole skin. Again, voice of experience here. You just would have to replace that one section. Really investigate that, though. I'm not sure how much your light transmission changes over the years, so although they say it will last 20 years or more, that's what the light transmission would be by year 20. I don't know. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. New tech pops up every year, and I just think making sure that you're not building something more than what you can pay for, especially when it comes to heating, is an important factor. Like, if it's going to cost you more money than that tunnel will make in profit over the next, 20 years, then maybe it's worth rethinking that design, or potentially rethinking what you're going to put in there. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Up next, let's talk about relay cropping, sometimes in tunnels. Be right back.
Is it time to talk things over? You can't get any colder. I've tried to warm things up without any luck.
Today's episode is brought to you by Good Agriculture. If you'd rather be on the farm than inside doing your taxes, you are not alone. Good Agriculture handles farm bookkeeping and tax filing, so there is no scrambling at tax time. They keep your books clean and up to date and show you where your farm's finances stand. If you're behind, they'll get you caught up. They also help farmers find funding and stay ahead of grant deadlines. You run the farm, they help the business. Learn more at goodagriculture.com/info. That's goodagriculture.com/info. All right, back to the show.
Today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Martin Kamaru, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I don't know about the States, but here in Denmark, orangeries," I'm assuming that's how you say it, that's French, but maybe they say it differently in Denmark, /heated greenhouses are semi-popular as a way to both season extend and to grow fruits that otherwise wouldn't survive the winters over here. As part of my long-term plan for my almost 1 acre site, I was thinking of building one. I've seen some people do it for very cheap by using used greenhouse windows. People often give away their entire greenhouse if 1 or 2 windows break during a storm. Do you have any experience with this? I know the value varies from person to person, but do you think the extra hassle of heating the greenhouse could theoretically be worth it compared to a passive one? End quote. All right, thanks, Martin. I love this question. So I'll answer the second part of your question first, which is largely, should I heat my
high tunnel? Like, does it make sense economically and or just in general? Well, some of that, actually, no, really all of it, will depend on what you're producing and what you're doing with that produce, but also how you're planning to heat it. If you've got a nice solar option or something that doesn't require much, if any, outside electricity or fuel, then I see no reason necessarily not to heat the tunnel in that situation. If you're relying on outside fuel like natural gas or electricity, especially there in Europe, then it's much more of a math problem as much as an environmental one. On the environmental side, is the production of the energy you need worth having out of season or out of context fruits and or vegetables? Probably not. And moreover, it would be hard to sell the fruit at a price that would both recoup the expenses and provide any sort of profit, and the space would have to be maximized to the greatest extent. Like, I have a friend who grew Meyer lemons here in Kentucky over the winter, and they had to sell each one for $12, just to even cover their costs. So it's a little tough. So effectively, it's kind of just using energy just because it's possible, and it doesn't always make sense economically. Of course, if you're using it for like high tunnel tomatoes or something that you could make relatively profitable, and you could get into production a month or so earlier than other growers, and you could do that using a small amount of heat, or you're growing well into the winter with greens and such, keeping the tunnel just above freezing, a la Elliot Coleman in the Winter Grower's Handbook. Those are situations where I think you could probably math it out a little better. Or if you're using that space exclusively, or at least partly, for plant starts, like in the spring, and just keeping it low, keeping the temperatures low and not necessarily hot, then it could financially work out. You would just have to literally, even though it feels like the right word here would be figuratively, because, figures, add up your costs and the potential revenue and see where you land on that. Now, having a high tunnel, it already extends your season in both directions by at least a month without any sort of heating. And there are also passive options that could reduce the reliance or maybe even need altogether for outside heating, such as climate batteries and the like, which we've done segments about, and I'll link those in the show notes, or at least one of them. The soil is a massive heat trap, the thermal mass, and some people even put water barrels for additional thermal mass on the north side of a tunnel to help trap the heat as well. There are options that are more passive, lower energy, but can even add a week or two in either direction, if not more, to each season. So that's where I guess that's where I would start. As for reusing the old glass, that's a little tougher. You'd have to build a structure that would exactly hold those old panes, which itself would probably create new panes. Let's see what I did there. We've built cold frames out of old windows, and that works pretty well. As long as you're thinking about things like what paint they used to use. You don't want old painted windows that might drop paint chips into your lettuce and that sort of thing. So that's something to think about with the cold frames. But taking down any old tunnel and trying to rebuild it can be quite challenging because the holes and all the pieces were fit together to fit that specific property and slope exactly as it was constructed. So moving it into your own property and trying to retrofit it can be a little bit of a battle unless you're taking it from a perfectly flat slab and putting it back onto a perfectly flat slab, and even in that case, it could be tough. So expect to have to drill, all new holes in many cases, though I'm not sure about glass structures. That's probably a little bit more complicated. They are a whole other level of complication, from the way you have to clean the windows to replacing them, obviously. Otherwise, people wouldn't be trashing them after the few of the panes break. Now, if the whole structure of that is sound and you can get it for fairly cheap and you enjoy a good project, I'm not going to say it won't work, and certainly people have done it and do it. And of course, I endorse, reduce, reuse, and recycle, all for that. But just examine it and make sure you feel confident that rebuilding the structure is a task that you are up for.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that compilation show. Don't forget that No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That is an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing who put this show together, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of March, you get a shout out on the show. But this week, we're going to hold off on those until, I have enough voice to tell a story. So that means we'll do a boatload of these next week. And so stay tuned. And thank you again for your patience. It's coming back. slowly. But anyway, much love. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com.